The Heat and the Pacers twice in a row. A rivalry kind of renewed, kind of not. The NBA Cup is back. It's everything fans want twice this weekend, and we'll break it down in a crossover. Locked On Pacers, Locked On Heat today.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Happy Friday. Welcome to Locked On Pacers and or Locked On Heat. Thanks for making us your first listen today and every single day here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This episode from both of us brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Heat Pacers tonight. Heat Pacers on Sunday, 2 in a row in Indy. The first one's the NBA Cup. Much to discuss. I'm Tony East. I host Locked On Pacers. Two wonderful gentlemen with me, Wes Goldberg and David Ramil of Locked On Heat. Guys, I long for the days where Heat Pacers was a thing. The conference finals was there. As long as Wade was on the team, it was a thing. TJ Warren and Jimmy Butler gave it some juice for a little bit. I miss it. The playoffs of 2020 added to it. It's not the same.
Yeah, I think there's a portion of the fan base of both of these teams that kind of look back on those Heat Pacers rivalry games in the playoffs, the big three versus Paul George and Roy Hibbert, and the whole concept of verticality versus like real basketball and all these things. Like the way that I think a lot of Heat fans look back on those Heat Knicks series from the 90s. It's just these grueling type of series that now they even, I mean, Heat Knicks feels like a lifetime ago, but even Heat Pacers feels like a different era of basketball at this point. And yeah, Jimmy Butler, TJ Warren notwithstanding, it feels like we haven't had like real stuff between these two teams in quite a while.
I thought that was a thing, but I'm sure Heat fans were like, okay, Jimmy Butler's way better than TJ Warren. This is not a thing.
That is a little bit of little brother syndrome. And you are outnumbered here, so you have to actually do a really good job of defending the Pacers on this episode.
Well, it's hard right now because I was going to say the thing that makes these two games uniquely interesting to me, beyond that, I want to talk about something. It's very hard for a team to beat another team twice in the NBA. So that both these teams probably feel like, dang, we've kind of stunk this year compared to what we hoped we would be or what we thought would be given our competition. We'll do the Heat first. David, I'll go to you. Why do you feel like the Heat haven't been what they hoped they'd be? Is it anything specific? Is it that Jimmy Butler's missed some time? What's happening in Miami?
A combination of things. Unfortunately, Bam Adebayo, I think you could point to him and say that he's been particularly ineffective. His scoring numbers are down. It just seems like he's totally lost in what was supposed to be a revamped offense that has led to Tyler Hero finding a way to succeed almost at the cost of everybody else putting up some kind of not so great numbers, let's say. Terry Rozier hasn't flourished the way a lot of people thought he would. His numbers have been down. His efficiency has been all across the place. Their defense hasn't been great. Their rebounding hasn't been great. So I don't think Jimmy Butler's injury really has been much of a factor because, well, even Jimmy Butler wasn't particularly good. Like you look at the decline that we thought he might have staved off for another season or two. Well, it seems like it might be hitting him a little bit closer than we had hoped. And so, you know, he's put up some decent numbers against some bad teams, but against good teams, he seems like he's a non-factor. He just doesn't have the same kind of athleticism, the same kind of ability to take over games the way he once did. So all these factors have worked together, and Miami is unfortunately just a kind of middling team at this point. And so they're really struggling to find any sort of clear identity. And Eric Spoelstra certainly didn't help as he did the other night when what could have been an easy victory for them, or at least a potential for a victory, you know, he kind of blew that as well. So, you know what? You can look at almost everything from the front office to coaching to the players themselves and say, you know what? You're all responsible for this mess.
It's almost like I don't know as well as you guys do the cap situation, the pick situation, but it almost feels like they're like running out of stick on this era of Heat basketball. Like they're out of stuff to go get something else to make it really go forever.
100%. And you kind of look back at the Terry Rozier trade in January, and the further we get away from that, the more surprising that trade was, because they had to send a first-round pick to Charlotte to make that deal. And this is a team that just didn't have that much to deal with in the first place, but they were feeling the pressure of a losing streak, of Kyle Lowry kind of playing his way out of town a little bit and just needing to find something to do with his expiring contract, because the vibes were just so bad in January at the time of making the deal that they did ask uncharacteristically in the moment. And in the moment, they were desperate. They didn't take that long view. And, you know, maybe you could still argue that doing the Terry Rozier trade was the right one, considering like the only thing that they gave up was a future first round pick and the opportunity to add somebody in free agency potentially this summer, where it feels like there wasn't really any free agent that they were going to be able to get for that money anyway. So I don't know, but it does kind of look worse the further away that you get from that. And then now you're standing in a spot where is Terry Rozier kind of untradeable at $24 million because he hasn't been playing well, and we only have one first-round pick that we can move unless we start lifting protections on picks, and then that's not as easy as it sounds. Plus, it's pretty dangerous considering that you don't know if Jimmy Butler's going to be here next year, and you don't know what the future of this team looks like. So when you say that they're running out of stick on this era, I've argued, and I've been arguing it for almost 2 years now, I think the window is closed. Like, I think we're done. I think that 2023 was the last gasp. I thought 2022, when they went to Game 7 in the conference finals and lost to the Celtics, I thought that was their best team. And that was a team that didn't make the NBA Finals, and they still made the NBA Finals twice during the Jimmy Butler era. So, yeah, look around the league, man. It doesn't look great when it ends. Look at Milwaukee right now. It's not awesome all the time, and it feels like that's where we're at right now with Miami.
Well, they'll find a random undrafted player here and there and be back to a 7-game win.
Look out for Pelle Larsson, and look, they're up. He's a second-round pick, so they're making moves here.
I want to ask about Khalil, but I don't know if today is the time for it. Yeah, it does give me that vibe. But then their playoff performance always seems to exceed their regular season until last year, and that's what's made it feel like it for me. Obviously, you guys covering the team day to day would see things in the timeline differently.
Can I
when
push
they
back
had
on
no
that?
Huh?
Can I push back on that?
Go ahead.
Like this whole idea that the Heat always overachieve expectations. That happened once. It literally happened once. The bubble doesn't count because all those playoff seeds were made up.
To me.
It does count. It does count.
Why does that count? Like none of the one seeds made it to the finals.
You were covering the Warriors.
I saw the whole bubble play out, and none of the favorites made it. Like, that was a weird year. That doesn't count for anybody. And then, and if you made the finals in the bubble, you outperformed expectations because nobody knew what to expect. So we didn't even know if we would get that far. We didn't know that the bubble would last that long. So
what if you got swept in the first round of the bubble playoffs?
There you go. Maybe that's underachieving whatever expectations. The following year, they had like a 4-hour offseason. They had to go into the next year. They get bombarded in the first round, so no expectations there. And then the year that they made it to the conference finals, they were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference. They were awesome in that regular season. The only time they ever really made a run was that 2023 run. This whole idea that they always exceed expectations in the postseason, I think, is just based off of one run.
I suppose the lack of home court advantage for other teams is all I will give you about the bubble. But if you are a bottom 4 seed and make the finals twice in 4 years, I'm going to give you a lot of credit for that.
Okay,
I agree.
We'll take I know David will take the credit. Yeah,
absolutely. I don't know what would have happened last year, and I know that's kind of playing what if games and stuff like that.
They would have lost to Boston.
I don't know that. I personally don't believe that. I don't know that that's the case. And given that Jimmy Butler, had he been healthy, and given what Jimmy has done to Boston in the past, had Terry Rozier had a little extra oomph against his former team, who knows? Like we played that game during last year's playoff. Yeah, those pieces were missing. They look bad against a great Celtics team, et cetera, that wound up winning the championship. But you know what? Maybe things would have been a little differently had they been out there. We'll never know, so it doesn't really matter. But had they beaten Boston and gone on another deep playoff run, I think you could have added some validity and justified the bubble as maybe being a real experience.
So, I'm not saying that the bubble was a fluke. I'm just saying that there was no expectations, and therefore you can't exceed them. That was a big if that you threw in there, David. If the Heat beat the number 1 ranked Boston Celtics that had like the most bajillion off the chart net rating, dominated the entire Eastern Conference and the NBA Finals. Yes, if they would have done that and made another run, I would say that they routinely exceed expectations, but that did not happen. Almost the opposite of that happened.
My Heat,
regardless, they're not meeting expectations this season. So
that's
if we're
correct.
staying on track, they're absolutely. We had.
Can I add in one more? Exceed expectations when they start 11-30 and still finish 500. That's cool. That's exceeding expectations for 41.
Shout
games,
out to Dion Waiters, man. Love that.
Yeah,
7-11. That was kind of cool. Does anyone remember that? Deep cuts, Josh Richardson era. Okay, back to this season for just a sec. Why is their offense so bad? I mean, I know you said they're trying to rework it, and Hero's been awesome. Like every time I've watched the Heat or had to watch the Heat for Locked On NBA days, he's been incredible for one reason or another. That hasn't always led to wins, but if he's doing what the hope would always be that he could do, why haven't they been good on offense? Is it just Bam? Is it just Jimmy?
Nobody else has been good. He's the only one that's been. He's literally Look at the stats. He's literally the only offensive player that's been any good. Duncan Robinson has had a couple of good games now. Period. That's it. Everybody else has been bad.
Is this a fixable thing, or is it just something is off?
If they can hit their shots, I mean, like, I don't know, that's huge variance, and it sounds like ridiculous, but the reality is that just they're so inefficient around the rim. One of the bottom teams there, Terry Rozier in particular, has been really bad. We just looked into the numbers in yesterday's episode. I mean, as a 2-point field goal percentage team, they're just woeful. Their 3-point shooting has been great.
Woeful, David. You dug up that stat. They were during the show. They're 30th. They're last in the league in 2-point percentage. That's awful.
Yeah, a lot of Pacers listeners will find that hard to believe after how bad the Pacers were Wednesday night. Too.
So is this whole game on Friday and Sunday just gonna be two teams bricking it from like 4 feet out? Like, is that just what's
I think so.
Well, boy, oh boy.
Although this feels like the Haliburton breakout game, though. So if there's something for
it already happened
to look forward to.
It happened last Sunday, and then he followed it up with 9 points on 14 shots. So I don't know if he needs another breakout game or how this works, but timing is that's just been a little stunning to me that the Heat don't have the connectivity of like, oh, they have a chance every night, and they look kind of woeful sometimes.
I do think just one last point on this before we move on to the Pacers. I think it is going to fix itself. The Heat are not an awesome offensive team in terms of shooting and efficiency. They're better than this, right? And I do think their shots are coming now from the right spots on the floor. It's just a matter of making those shots. And Bam, Terry Rozier, Jimmy Butler, like these guys haven't lit up scoreboards for their careers, but they have also been better than what they've been so far. So if they're just get back to where they are from their career averages or something close to it, then the Heat will be back into being the Heat will probably level out into somewhere in a average offense, middle of the pack offense, which is better. They've been bottom 10 in the league for the last 2 seasons in offensive.
That's where the Pacers are. They're middle of the pack too.
Exactly. And then hopefully you get a little bit of workable defense, which has also been a problem in Miami.
And I don't think of the Heat as having like this long list of elite finishers, but I don't think they should be this bad, right? So if you're getting good shots at the rim, you should eventually, they will go in. The hope would be, obviously, when does it become a thing for you guys? Because for me, it's 10 games. Like, okay, now maybe this is a trend and not just like a fluky start. Let's talk about the Pacers, but we have to talk about one more thing before we do that. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial flavors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now, the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.25% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boosts on IRA account contributions. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month on Robinhood. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold, which you can sign up for at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply. For product-specific disclosures, visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investing involves risks. Rates may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. David, you just said the Pacers are middling on offense, and that is true. They're 16th in offensive rating. That's really a problem for a team that was their thing last year. And before you guys ask any questions, let me tell you, that is why they are 5-6. Their offensive floor is way lower. Even last year when Haliburton would struggle, they were a guarantee to score 100 plus every night. They've already had 3 games under 100 this year. Yes, he is struggling. A lot of other stuff is going wrong for them, and they don't look like the same team right now. That's why they're 5-6.
What is the difference? What are those things? Because, I mean, obviously Haliburton's struggles are one thing, but as you pointed out, even when he wasn't at his best last year, they were still a pretty decent team and found a way to connect and find their offensive groove. What else has gone wrong for Indiana's offense this year?
Yeah, I was thinking about this today, and a big part of it is their depth has been different. I don't mean like worse necessarily, because they've had good performances off the bench. But last year, they would put out TJ McConnell and any 4 other players, and they could keep up with any team, right? They led the league in bench scoring. McConnell was really good, and then even better after Ben Mathurin got hurt. So their bench groups always were keeping them in games or extending their lead. And this year, that bench has not been nearly the same. They just played Orlando Wednesday night, and they beat Orlando a week earlier than that with McConnell having a great game and Jarris Walker having a great game and other bench guys stepping up. Their whole bench was terrible in Orlando. So, yes, Haliburton had an off night, and that hurt them. But if their bench was as good or even close to as good as last year, they might have won that game. That didn't happen, right? That's been a factor, too, as he's dealt with an illness and hasn't looked as effective. They've obviously lost 2 reserve centers to Achilles tears already. That's kind of changed their vertical spacing of their bench groups. Obi Toppin missed his first game as a Pacer period in 2 seasons. Like, just a lot has snowballed to make their bench worse. So Haliburton struggles. Myles Turner's been off finishing plays at times this year, despite a couple big games. And the bench is just all connected to make it feel like they're trying to do lineups every night. And they haven't had the same floor because of the depth and ceiling because of Haliburton offensively.
I have a quick Haliburton stat, and I'm not probably telling you anything you don't know, Tony, but in Indiana's 11 games, in the 11 games Haliburton's played, he's shot 40% or worse in 7 of them. The Pacers are 2-5 in those games, and the games that he shoots better than 40%, they're 3-1. So it just feels like when his shots go in, everything else kind of clicks into place, and maybe that's overly simplistic, but I watched the Pacers this year, and I'm like, they don't look like the Pacers from last year. Like, partly because Haliburton's struggling, maybe because Haliburton is struggling, but they don't even have the same pace. They're like in their bottom half of the league in pace this year. They were top 5 in the league in pace last year. I think it's like 4 possessions every 48 minutes different, which is pretty dramatic considering it's essentially the same personnel, and it's led by a pace setter like Haliburton. So, like, are you noticing that same thing, Tony? Is there something more? Is that because just Haliburton is struggling, and like I guess all like the things that tie this team together just kind of fall apart?
Tie this team together. Nice. Good job. Yeah, the jarring splits for him would be like in wins, he's at 22-9-4 with 59% true shooting. In losses, he's at 11-8-4 on 41% true shooting. 41. That's like unfathomably bad for someone of his volume. And you're absolutely right about the pace part. Like, part of what made them so awesome last year is they were second in pace, and the Wizards were only first in pace because their defense was so bad that they let in a layup like 3 seconds into every defensive possession.
And not just part of it, felt like a big part of, like a majority. Like they were so hard to scout for. You just didn't know. Like as soon as the tip happened, you were on your heels if you were.
Every opposing team would say that. Like, we can't scout or prep for this opponent, both because it's fast and because the way they describe their offense is random. And it's random to us watching because we don't know what they're going to do, but like they know how to flow off of each other and what's coming and what should be next, so they can be threatening. This year they're 11th. This year they're 15th in pace, right? Like, that's a huge drop too, and a big part of their identity. And some of that's been that they haven't had that free-flowing random style. And I would say that in sort of a positive way, some of that has been that their 2 best players, Pascal Siakam and Ben Mathurin this year, are a little more like turn and face and play a little slower, and they can still score at a high level doing that. And they have been for almost this entire season. Siakam's one of only 12 guys in the league averaging 27 and 5 this year. Like, he's been absurdly good. But in some ways, it hurts their total team potency when that's happening. And I don't think they want it to be those guys are good, so our identity's gone. I think it's become crap. Our identity's kind of fading. We need those guys to do this, right? So they need to flip the order of operations on why that's happening to get their offense going. And it felt like they had a couple turning point games recently. They won in Dallas. They beat Boston in overtime. They beat Orlando pretty handily. They beat the Knicks for their first double-digit win. Like, all those sound like a team that's pretty good with a nice profile. And then they score 83 in Charlotte and fall flat on their face against the Magic without Banchero. It's just so bizarre to get a read on what's happening because their identity from last year is just not even close to there.
Is Haliburton still
go ahead.
No,
One of you.
No, I was going to go ahead. I think we're going to ask the same question.
I love that you started with the same 2 words.
Is Haliburton? I don't know that we're going to ask the same thing. If we're going to ask the same thing, I'd be surprised. Is he still taking the pregame naps?
Oh, no, that's not. I think David was going to ask if he was hurt. He is not taking pregame naps. Steph Curry has dismayed him, although he has hit clutch shots all the time, including after his nap in Detroit. So maybe they'll stick. I don't know.
All right, David, ask the smarter question now.
I was going to ask if there's something wrong. Like, I mean, it's just a kind of hangover from the summer. Is he hurt, etc.? Because like we're wondering the same thing about Bam and Adebayo, both of whom shared the Olympic experience, obviously, and I know their minutes were different. But I mean, is there some kind of delayed effect from that? I don't know. I'm just wondering because Haliburton seems healthy, and I haven't heard that he isn't. Is there something wrong that you've seen or that he said up close?
I've been trying to peek in on all the Olympians to see how much that could be a factor. And Bam's like one of the only guys on Haliburton's path because like Steph and LeBron and Ant are going crazy.
We got to find out where their lockers were. Maybe they were like
they were in the moldy corner of some French locker room while the other 10 players somewhere else. Yeah, he says he's not, right? Like we can see him sitting with like some wrap around his back on the bench, and sometimes he's on some pad to elevate him. So maybe it's a back thing. My theory would be, because I asked him if his back's bothering him during games, he said, no, he's good, is that it's not until he gets like hit hard or falls hard. And that might be something to it, where he is telling the truth that it's not bothering him. But then if he gets hit hard, it hurts. Like if you guys watch the WNBA finals, Alana Smith had that problem for for the Lynx when she had a back injury, when she'd get hit immediately, it hurt her effectiveness. Maybe it's that, because I don't think it's the hamstring anymore. He played in the Olympics before he got injured in the Olympics, but still, he looked fine in those pre-Olympic exhibitions. Like him and Bam were like this awesome duo at that time that was clicking every game. So I don't know if he's hurt. Like, it hasn't been on an injury report or anything like that. So I don't necessarily know that he's hurt, or if he is, he's not willing to admit it. And a lot of NBA stars don't want to admit to that weakness if they are. But it might just be a slump like he had in March last year. But if it is, it's really rough. It's really one he needs to get through. And he's talked about just shooting through it. His team believes he'll do it. And he kind of did a couple times, but not enough yet. Not enough for these guys.
TJ McConnell's going to have a big game.
He always does.
He's had 2 20-plus games since December of last year against Miami. This is a guy who, for his career, averages 7.5 points per game. He is going to go off in this game. It's going to happen. You
came with the stats. It's always funny because every time I do a crossover, the other person's like, TJ McConnell does so much better against our team than everyone else. I'm
really?
Like, no, he does. Yes. But you are right, actually. I think the Heat is among his top opponents.
Yeah, so you need the stats to back it up. Like, you need to go on StatHead. You need to search it. Like, you can't it doesn't work if you only have to. Can I give you
a theory? I think the Heat might just stink against Pacers small guards because the Pacers won without Haliburton in Miami last year because Bruce Brown went freaking nuts. That was his best game in a Pacers uniform by far.
So who did the Heat have problems with in like those Paul George teams? Was it like Lance
never
Stevenson
George Hill.
was never. It wasn't George Hill. Who was the other guards on those teams?
DJ Augustine and
he probably went off for it. He feels like a Heat killer, DJ Augustine. Let me get on.
Why does Heat have
really
so many Heat killers? Is it just because they played in so many high-profile games for so long?
I think that's part of it. And David and I were actually talking about this the other day. The part of their strategy is like, we're not going to let your best guy beat us. And if TJ McConnell goes off for 20, we'll probably still win the game. If he goes off for 40, then just take your hat off to him. But I think that's generally been a strategy of theirs, but sometimes it backfires.
Last year, that was a lot of team strategy against the Pacers that did not end up working very well. Orlando Johnson I don't remember him ever having big games against the Heat.
I don't even remember that person. I don't know what you're talking about.
Wow. Hater alert. Rasal Butler. Not really. Donald Sloan. He had a couple put thorn in your side kind of stuff. Is the answer really DJ Augustine? That's not very exciting.
So DJ Augustine, looking up his highest point totals in his career. He did not when he was in Charlotte, he went off for 27 points in 2009, but never as a member of the Indiana Pacers did he have a giant game. Playing for Detroit, he had 25 points. I could just keep reading lists if you want. I think people love that.
I'm sure the listeners would love to hear. DJ Augustine,
Lance Stevenson. It was Lance Stevenson who wound up burning Miami during those games.
Did he, or did he just annoy them? I don't remember him having like a big game.
He was good in the first conference finals, but not as much the second one.
Yeah, but it would always be like Jan Mahinmi or somebody like that. Like it was just somebody coming from out of nowhere. It's just, I don't know if the guards necessarily were a problem for Indiana, but again, that does feel like a really long ago era.
I'm glad you said this because now when someone else comes to me and says, "Oh, TJ McConnell does way better against the team I cover than every other team," we go, "Actually, thank you, Wes Goldberg. The answer is the Heat. He does better against the Heat than anybody else." If you put TJ McConnell on a Heat culture program, that dude might actually average 20 per game. We'll see.
So the most points, I guess we can end this impromptu segment this way. Let's take a guess. Give me the over-under, or we'll do Price's Right style. Lance Stevenson's most points against the Heat while wearing a Pacers uniform.
Well, he was really good that one year. He almost averaged a triple-double. I'll say 27.
David?
25.
15.
Wow.
15. Wow. He did it twice. 15 points. That's it.
That's actually surprising to me. He scored 22 in one quarter against
Never burned him. He just
this decade.
Him. He just annoyed him. Never burned him. LeBron
those
shut
games
that
were
down.
So low scoring anyway. Those games were so low scoring.
You guys,
I guess 15 points back then. It was like 30 points now.
He is still, I believe, the NBA leader in number of times blowing in LeBron's ear. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone else has won even besides him. I want to talk about a thing Tony East loves that no one else cares about. It's the NBA Cup. The Heat already played an NBA Cup game. I'm kind of jealous. Let's talk about it to close this one out. But not until we talk about the lovely people over at FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action. Hopping on some NBA hoops with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers over on FanDuel can bet $5 and get 150 in bonus bets if that $5 bet wins. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL and NBA all in one place. So when you get that hunch, it happens to everybody in the middle of a game, you know what's coming. Well, you can go check out the latest stats or view live play-by-play and so much more, so you know what's happening, you know who's cooking, and be as informed as possible. And all that information is going to be on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com today to join. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Locked on Pacers, Locked on Heat, crossing it over. I love the NBA Cup, guys. Maybe it's because I had and got to cover many joyous games last year. Maybe it's because I like when there's consequence, and I'm a psycho who was tracking all the point differentials for every group last year, not even the one I had to cover. I like it. Before we actually talk about it, do you like the NBA Cup, both of you?
Go ahead, David.
I do. I think it adds a dimension of excitement to it. Like I was skeptical at first because it felt like a money grab, and it felt like they were trying to. I hate all the prepackaged marketing of it, the Ocean's 12 style, commercials and everything else. It didn't feel right. But as the games went on, you could tell the players buying into it, and I felt like there was just an added dynamic to it that made the games more exciting. And look, covering 82 games is not easy, especially with a team as middling as the Miami Heat. So having said that, looking at the tournament and everything, it brought the excitement and everything else. I was starting to feel it myself. And you could tell that the players were buying into it and wanted to win this thing and that they wanted to show out. And so to me, I started feeling that same excitement as well.
So I'm an aspirational enjoyer at this point. In my life, in general, I feel like my default setting is a little bit cynical and questioning. And so I saw the NBA Cup in-season tournament presented by Emirates and Taco Bell and whatever else it is, and just said like, yeah, this is stupid. What's in it for me? So what? The winning team gets $500,000. What do I care? And then it all happened last year, and I thought to David's point, like the marketing around it was a little over the top, but also like over the top in the worst ways. Like nobody ever really felt like explaining what it was. It was just like, hey, it's in Vegas, and you're like, okay. Yeah. Like a lot of things are in Vegas. Am I just supposed to enjoy that? You know, like Madonna's in Vegas. I don't want to go see her. Like, what's the difference? So
the Sphere, Wes, the Sphere.
Right. Yeah. So I'm like, who cares if it's in Vegas? So, but I'm trying to like it. I'm trying to enjoy it. And actually last year for the first NBA Cup game, I said, I'm not going to go as media. I'm going to go as a fan. So I went and I got a beer and I watched it with that bright red Miami Heat court. And I was like, nope, still don't get it, even with a little bit of a buzz. So it actually made it harder to follow. Go figure. But I'm trying to like it. I want to like it. I do want to like it. So I'm going to buy in. I'm going to buy in. I'm going to consciously make that effort to buy in. But if the Heat lose on Friday night and it's like an 85-83 game, I'm going to be like, the NBA Cup is stupid.
And they're just done because they'd be 0-2. They already played a game.
Yeah, also that. They already lost one. So forget it.
Congrats to the Heat, by the way, for being the first beneficiaries of the new overtime rule where the point differential does not count in overtime. So they are still
really
even in the plus
ahead of their time, the Miami Heat. You know, they're finding loopholes. Yep.
Here's my thought, besides that I liked it in general. I agree that it's too much like, hey, it's in Vegas and not enough like there's a trophy and money on the line. Like that's way cooler for the players. I think that maybe they realized it because of the court, but like Kevin Durant, I remember him saying, because I think the Suns almost made it to the quarterfinals, but didn't make it on game differential or point differential last year. The third or fourth game they played, he was like, dang, this felt like a playoff game. And I didn't like it at first either. To me, when it becomes awesome is after like, let's say 2 games when a team staffer or coaching staff can walk into the locker room and go, guys, if we win this game, or we win by this amount, or we don't lose by this amount or whatever, then this happened. Like as soon as they have the carrot dangled in front of them of like an incentive for just this night, which is so hard to get in the NBA, that's when it becomes awesome. And so like probably 10 teams that go 0-2 or whatever are eliminated right away, and that's not as fun. The other 20 teams, like after the first game, there's always something important of consequence in your group or something that's very easy to dangle in front of players. That's why I think they try just that much harder. And maybe it is the court, but like, you know, Wes and I did Locked On NBA Tuesday night. Minnesota kept their starters in down $1 billion to the Blazers because they cared about point difference, right? And then they ended up losing the normal game against them the next night because they were tired, right? So I do think there's more to it. And I already like stuff that I can like compute and be a dork about. But if it makes better NBA games, I'm in. And it so far actually has done that.
You're right about I'm glad you brought up the Minnesota thing because they were down 16 and Anthony Edwards played until the last 20 seconds of that game. And that's kind of cool if you're an NBA fan. It's like, oh, wow, like I'm not going to tune into this game in the fourth quarter and all the scrubs are in. Like, that's kind of cool. And you're right. Like when you get to like game 3, game 4 of this group stage and you have a coach that says, hey, we got to win this. Not only do we have to win this game, but we have to like kick the snot out of that team and we got to win by 25. And that's the only chance we have of making it out of our group. Then everybody's just going to rally around that. And that's cool. Yeah. And that does make for a better fan experience. And that's, I guess, my only thing. It's like, okay, like the winning team is engaged. Kevin Durant kind of feels like it's a playoff game. And if it feels like a playoff game for the fan and you just get a good night of basketball, like we got on Tuesday night, Tony, like that's all cool. But like, I wish there was something for the fan to actually care about that was tangible. So I'm trying to think of like fixes for the NBA Cup. And like, what if you know how like when you set up your NBA account on NBA.com and you have like your NBA ID and it asks you what your favorite team is? When everybody, you put the Pacers, you put the Heat, whatever you put in.
Sure.
If the team that wins the cup, all of their fans just get like league pass for a year for free.
That'd be cool.
Like just something, because if you're invested in the NBA Cup, then you like the NBA in general, not just your own team, and you should be rewarded for that. Like just something like that would be really cool. Because then if you're a Pacers fan or a Heat fan, and you're like watching your team, like I'm gonna like that's $200, $300, whatever league pass is. It's like that's money in my pocket, baby, and I got this thing for a year. Let's go.
A rush of fans signing up right before the title game, trying to guess
trial.
what team's gonna win. And then if half people go wrong, the NBA
that's fine. You get
money.
The signups. Yes, you get the signups. Let's go.
I think that I like the neutral site championship game in some ways. Like it does feel kind of Final 40 in that way. But a way to, and I got lucky that the Pacers were the #1 seed last year, but they hosted a tournament, air quotes, game. And that environment was cool for fans. Like that could be a carrot, but only 2 teams get that every year, right? So there's not enough there. I think you'd have to get.
Are they motivated this year?
Maybe they need something to motivate them. So
we'll
find out tomorrow.
I know the Heat aren't. But
the Heat will never win this NBA Cup thing. Like the way that they approach the regular season now, I shouldn't say that. Like if they kind of retool this thing and rebuild and there's like a bunch of young guys, I could actually see them going like full like, but that's like a different team that we're talking about.
Summer League champions.
Yeah, exactly. Like just put the summer. Yeah, David, just let's put out Khalil Ware, Pella Larson, bring Isaiah Stevens back on a 2-way. Yeah. Just send those guys out there. They'll take this way more seriously than this Heat team would.
Yeah,
that's a bummer. Well, I'm actually bummed the Heat already lost because the Pacers are 5-6 and have the best record in this group right now, right? Like this group sucks.
Yeah.
So if there was a year that Heat not taking it seriously could actually win the NCAA tournament, it's this. It's like, oh, our group just stinks because the Bucks aren't as good as people thought. We could stumble into the quarterfinals, then you're 2 wins away. Like it just could work out, but unfortunately, of all the players,
did you care?
It was none of the players.
Can I ask, like, so when the Pacers were in it last year, were you obviously you're excited for that game? Were you bummed out when they lost? Like you would be like bummed out if they lost a playoff game? No, right?
No, it didn't count either, right?
Yeah, even it's actually less. It's less hurtful than a regular loss.
Well, the devil's advocate part of me would say, look how bad the Pacers and Lakers did right after, and they were the only team that played the extra game. And everyone's gonna say, boo-hoo, athletes playing games. Like, yes, you should say boo-hoo; it's their job, but at the same time. It's not lost on me that they both, like, whether for hangover reasons from all the attention they were getting or from literally an extra game, like they both did stink for like 2 weeks after that.
What if the winning team? What if the 2 teams in the finals got to just pick a game on their schedule to get rid of within like the next like month? They said like, and it counts as like an automatic win or something.
They would all pick the Celtics.
Right, yeah. And then the Celtics would have like 2 losses or something. It would be great.
Can we just skip the Celtics? We don't want to play them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I talked to a lot of players about the prize money for a story last year, and they were all like, yeah, it's nice, but like, it's not really why, I'm like psyched. I do kind of wonder if I think the best idea I heard is you win every tiebreaker if you win the in-season tournament.
Yes.
Like for playoff seeding. I think that's the best one.
I don't even know why that doesn't exist. That is an automatic, obvious thing. It doesn't affect actual record. It's just, hey, Like, screw your division, screw head-to-head, all this stuff. If you win it and you have the same record, you get the better seed. That is
actually
the most
very
obvious
helpful.
fix. Yes.
The Pacers would have been a different seed last year if that was reality. Yep. The Heat would have been fighting like crazy to get to 47 last year.
It would make winning it that it would matter, right?
It does matter, right? Like, it's great that two-way players get to double their salary. Don't get me wrong, but
but who cares?
For sure.
Like, as a fan, you don't care. That's my problem. Is like I'm sorry, I don't care if Drew Smith makes more money this year. Like, that doesn't matter to me if I'm a fan of the team. Like, that's not why you root for the team. You root for the team to win the championship. So how does this help us win something material? It doesn't right now. And if anything, to your point, it actually hurts us because you have to play that extra game and then you go in a little bit of a tailspin.
I will say this, though. The problem I had with the argument of they stunk after it because they played the extra game is to get to that game, they had to win a lot, right? So it did help their record to get there. But then it hurt them. It's kind of a hard balance to strike, right?
We need more of a sample to see if this actually is
what was me? We went 5-0 against good teams in the NBA Cup, So I again like it, but I do think there are some, as we've worked through here, some tweaks to be made from
tiebreaker. That tiebreaker thing is an obvious one. I also think that the groups should just be the same every year.
If only there were groups of 5 in the NBA called like divisions or something that they could use. Man, that would be really convenient.
It would make divisions matter a little bit, like that. Like explaining. Well, I know we're going long here, Tony. I'm sorry, but I'm curious.
No, I like this. I like
people in your life, because you actually experienced it. Like David and I didn't experience. The Heat didn't make it to the knockout stage. So
yeah,
and we had a hard enough time just on our end being like, hey, yeah, they're 2-2 in group stage, but they only won their group by 4 points.
And then you have to explain like, oh, they have these new randomly scheduled regular season games now.
They're like, who do we play next? And you're like, I don't know. Like, we'll find out betting on this other game across the country. And you're like, what? Like. What is that? How does that? So yeah, how did you explain this to like not only the your audience on your podcast, but I'm sure people in your life who will routinely look to you to be like, what's going on with the Pacers? What is this NBA season tournament thingy?
Yeah, the problem became when they got really far, because early on, the people who would ask were already big basketball fans. I could be like, it's like the Olympic group play or like the World Cup group play in soccer. Right? It's kind of like that with no ties, right? And that's what they wanted. Format-wise, they talked about soccer inspirations, and that's why goal difference became point difference and all that. So that part like was generically easy to explain, but when it came later on, and it was like, well, they could win their group or lose, but still be the wild card team that makes the quarterfinals, and they might have a home game, but they might not have a home game. That's when it got hard. And the problem was those kind of parts came when they were already doing well, because that's when other people were like, oh, what's the in-season tournament? So then you have to do these long explainers to people who are catching up when the scenarios are more vast. So after group play was very easy. It was like, okay, they're in the quarterfinals. They're the top seed. They host the Celtics. Here we go. But like after game 2, really, it got pretty tricky to kind of work through and explain. I don't really know how to, it's not like a complicated thing once you know it, but it is hard to, there are a lot of layers at first. The barrier entry is high.
That's well said. I think that's what most people are finding. It's like, what is this thing? And then you start talking, and then their eyes glaze over, and they're like, I actually don't care what this thing is. Never mind. And wait, dude, and it's not the championship? It doesn't really matter? Okay, cool. Don't care anymore.
It's a 10-tabber. This is what people have started to call it here. Because here's how it goes. You open Safari on your phone, right? Because you're at a Pacers game, and you're like, why the hell is the court ocean blue? So you Google, why are the Pacers playing on a blue court? And then you get an article about it. And it's the NBA Cup. And then your new tab says, what's the NBA Cup? And then you find that out, and then who do the Pacers play in the NBA Cup? Who's the Pacers group? It keeps layering and layering, right? And it's just it needs to be more simple and even though I love it.
It sounds like everybody here likes it. Yeah,
I get a lot of juice out of this. We just got 8 minutes.
I'm choosing to like it.
Nonsense.
I am choosing to like it, everybody. I'm going to choose to like it, and then we'll see what happens on Friday. But I'm choosing right now. I'm making a conscious choice. I'm going to wake up and choose enjoyment.
Indiana's going to win both games, so we have nothing to worry about, Tony. Pacers are going to win them both.
Nothing makes me think you don't like it more than you saying you're choosing to like it. I'm not going to lie.
That's very fair.
Well, the other topic I wanted to get to, we won't because we've been going long, but very rare that a team sweeps a team when they play each other twice in a row, as what happened in Miami last year when Bruce Brown went crazy after Haliburton went crazy in a loss. Pacers and Heat split those. We'll see if either of these teams can sweep these games and change the trajectory of their season. For more, Locked On Pacers will be back after Friday's game and Sunday's game, breaking down what happened and potentially NBA Cup ramifications should they be required. What's coming on Locked On Heat, guys?
We're gonna have a recap of both of these games early next week.
Basically, we'll see if Miami can figure out an identity at some point over the next 5 games. I'm not sure what's going on with Jimmy Butler. I don't think he's been ruled out for Friday's game yet, but
he has.
I would doubt that he's been officially ruled out.
Just right before we started recording, the injury report came out. So, but
nice.
Nikola Jovic, he's got a face mask, broken nose. He's available.
That's a hell of a mask to cover that nose.
I think I would need the same mask.
Both these teams quite fortunate that the East stinks, and they might be able to waltz into real games later in the season anyway. A chance to correct things this weekend. Thank you all for listening. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you very soon.